I'm Denise.
She's a non-fiction editor. And I'm Louise.
She's a fiction editor. And together,
we're the Editing Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Editing Podcast. So this week, we're going to be chatting about networking tips for editors and proofreaders.
That's right. And we're delighted to welcome two guests who are going to help us do just that. Two people who know so much about it, they wrote a book about it.
Indeed, they did. So a very special hello to our colleagues Brittany Dowdle and Linda Ruggeri, two professional editors.
And the co-authors of Networking for Freelance Editors.
Hello, you two. This is Linda. And I just can't believe we get to be the guests of episode 84. Can I say this, that Brittany and I've been wanting to say this forever. We're beyond chuffed to be right here. Right, Brittany?
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much for asking us to join you. We've been so excited to be able to be here.
Oh, we're so glad to have you both. So we'll talk about networking tips in a moment, but first, Denise and I would love to chat about the book. It's one thing to present a webinar or write a blog about networking, but quite another to create a full-blown book. So what made you decide to write it?
Well, a couple of years ago, Linda and I volunteered to co-direct the Welcome Program, which is an outreach of the Editorial Freelancers Association's diversity initiative. I know that's a mouthful. And one of the goals of the program is to help new members build their professional network. So as we worked with our fellow editors, a lot of them who were newcomers to editing or just newcomers to freelancing, we realized how challenging networking can be, and that as important as it is, no one really teaches us how to do it. It's all trial and error for the most part. Yeah. So, and we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
So we thought that writing this book would be a way to share what we've learned so that other editors who are starting out have the tools that we've had to learn along the way. Because I think we've all benefited from, mentors and other editors who've been in the business longer than we have. And so you always want to do your part to kind of help the other people who are coming up or who are just getting into the industry.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Absolutely. I think that, as Brittany mentioned, we meet editors and we've met editors throughout the different organizations that we belong to. And we kept seeing that over and over again, freelance editors were struggling with the same topics. Like, how do I find work? And what organization should I join? And, what does my online profile need to look like? And how many chocolate croissants can we eat in one day? How do I connect with a big 5 publisher? And we knew that we were learning how to effectively network, and that maybe with all this information we were gathering, what we were learning, we could help freelancers like us answer all of these questions. And like Brittany said, we've benefited so much from the wisdom and the generosity of the editing community throughout our careers that we felt that writing this book was a great way to give back. But also, I'm going to add to this that Brittany and I, we belong to a little mastermind group. And with the gals of this group, we've always been interested in how to grow our business. How do we make it more sustainable in the long term? And what can we do better and more efficiently or more effortlessly? So Brittany and I both have read so many different books on business. We've read articles and blog posts that we had all this information that we knew we could share this with other editors. So putting all of that in a book really made sense to us.
Yeah.
I think what you said there, I think it's great that you've written a book specifically for editors, because I think it is such an issue. Like you say, you've identified with so many editors who, we tell them you've got to network, you've got to get out there and you've got to network. But, what does that mean and how do you do it? I think people can feel quite overwhelmed with it, really. And I also think it's lovely that you're framing it, that you're giving back to the community, because I think we've all benefited earlier in our careers from the generosity of others and their willingness to share information in the community. And it's lovely to be in a position where you can be the one that's doing that now. So we'll make sure that there's a link to the book in the show notes, but let's dig into some of the nitty-gritty around networking. And, you know, as I've already said, I'm sure some people are listening and going, oh, networking, it's marketing, and I don't like marketing because I'm an introvert, and so I'm not going to like this and I won't be able to do it. So what do you think? I mean, do you need to have a specific type of personality to be good at networking?
No, not really.
That's good to hear.
No, really. We've met literally hundreds of editors in the last couple of years through all the volunteer work that Brittany and I do. And what we've come to see is that networking is available to anyone. You have to do what comes naturally to you. But I think the secret really is to be successful. You do have to know yourself, and you have to know who you're trying to reach and why you're trying to reach them. And once you have that info, you can plan how you're going to reach them, when you're going to reach them, and where you're going to reach them. But it really stems from knowing yourself, I think, first.
Exactly. And one of the things that we discuss in the book is how to find the place where what comes naturally to each of us, which is our own personal communication style, where that intersects with the activities that we tend to think of as networking. Because in order to network effectively, you really need to know what your comfort zone is and work with it rather than against it. Because so often, if you're telling yourself, oh, I need to do this, or I should be doing this way, that can tend to build up a bit of internal resistance. So instead of trying to make yourself do things that you're not comfortable with, if you work kind of with the flow, I think that there are a lot of benefits to that. So if you're, let's say, more comfortable networking online rather than in person, and right now, with the pandemic, that's what a lot of us have had to do. But even if that just comes naturally to you, that's fine. You can build a strong networking that way. And if you're not into social media and you'd really rather network in a more direct person-to-person way, that's fine too. You can still build a vibrant network either way. You just need to know what's comfortable for you, but then sometimes be willing to stretch that a little bit, because there are times when we're just afraid of trying something new and then it turns out that we really enjoy it. And so, yeah.
I think that's such an important point, because networking isn't one thing, is it? It's a big thing that incorporates lots of, and listeners need to take that away. I think that the way I do my networking might not be the same way as someone else does their networking. And
right.
And you're absolutely right as well. I love that thing that you said about the giving yourself the opportunity to stretch, because sometimes when you start with a thing that you're most comfortable with, that can give you a confidence boost, and then it feels a little more comfortable because at least you've got the foundation there. Like, I've done it this way and that felt good, so maybe I can just dip my toe into this area now. But
yes,
if you start by you build your foundation with going back to that thing that Linda said about starting from that place where you understand what kind of person you are. And so it might help those listeners who are sitting on the fence, or those who've decided that they're not even going to climb it in the first place, to hear about some of your positive networking experiences. Can you chat about those? What were they, and what impact did they have on you?
Sure. So I think in looking over my career, many of the best projects that I've had have come through my network, because when you share your passion for editing and the work that you do with people who are in your circle of acquaintances, that can bring projects to you that are more vetted, that are a better fit for you, because they're coming from people who know you and they know they trust you. So and by the way, quite often they're better paid jobs, because you're not competing for them based on price, but based on value. But for specific projects, one that comes to mind for me is recently I completed a project about the history of dirt track motorcycle racing in the US. You might also know it as flat track racing. But so motorcycles are a big part of my life. It's how I met my husband. It's what he did for a living. And a mutual contact in the motorcycle industry knew I was an editor and recommended me to a publisher and an author who were working on this huge monumental project, which it was like took years to complete, but it was recently published and it's amazing. But
and it's a roaring success. She
it
said,
is
trying to segue in a motorcycle thing there.
It's really cool. So it's just I love it because I feel like it's a piece of history. But
Yeah.
The neat thing about that project was that besides being good from a business perspective, it was also just a really rewarding experience for me because I got to help preserve this, special part of motorcycle racing history. And I got to, to work one-on-one with a really amazing author. But I guess, bringing it back, these are the types of projects that your network will, bring to you, and that you in turn can also sometimes you'll bring into the lives of other network or other editors, because your networking goes both ways, right?
And you've pointed to something out really important that listeners need to pay attention to, is that your network, we're not just talking here about editorial networks, we're talking about lots and lots of different networks in your life to do with, all sorts of different things. So we don't need to limit ourselves to the existing communities that we're aware of. They might be outside.
Yeah, and that's where you can get those dream projects, because it's that intersection of the work you do, but perhaps it's the topics and hobbies that you have love and passion for. And what's better than getting paid to do a job that you love the subject, and you feel connected to it in a way that you don't necessarily with other projects from other parts of your more professional networks. And I think that's the really nice opportunity that we get when we think of our network more broadly.
Yeah, my husband's going to be so jealous when he listens to this, because he just passed his full motorcycle test. He's been riding for years, but this is completely nothing to do with editing. I'm just throwing this in. But he's going to buy a really big fat Royal Enfield at the weekend.
Oh, nice.
And he's so excited.
Yes.
And the idea that if I had worked on the book that you worked on, Brittany, he would have been actually interested in my work for once. There you go. Anyway, as you were.
Yeah, right. So Linda, you must have some good stories too.
Oh my gosh, I have like so many little great networking stories, but I think I'll share two of the ones that I guess have touched me recently. One of them happened a few years ago. I like to write on the side, and I went to a writers convention for the Writers Digest here in LA a few years ago. And one evening I attended a presentation where the speaker was talking about how to do a virtual book tour. And this was like before the pandemic, which I think is so mind-blowing to me, for those of us that couldn't travel maybe. And that night there was a reception. So I saw him there. I walked up to him and, said thank you, because his ideas had really inspired me, basically because I do a lot of author coaching as well. So to help my clients maybe expand their book marketing plans and what they could do in terms of book marketing outside of their comfort zone with these, virtual presentations. And we exchanged email addresses. We stayed in touch. He happened to be actually a ghostwriter also, and he owned a small publishing house. And ever since then, I will collaborate with him on a lot of his projects. So if he picks up on a project for ghostwriting services, he'll hire me as developmental editor. And on the same token, I have a lot of contacts in Latin America, and he's written a series of books, of YA books that he's trying to get published in South America. So I've been able to open up my South American network so that he can contact them and hopefully sell the rights to one of his books down there. So that's one of the great, stories for me about something that's not within my editorial community, but out of it, and it can still be successful, and it still brought me business and opened a lot of doors. And my second networking story is a little bit more local and more recent. But basically, the week that the book came out, this is a few months ago, a colleague of mine was reading it, and she texted me one evening, me and another editor, and she said that, I belong to this one organization, and I've been getting their newsletter for 14 years, but I've never attended one of the meetings that they have. So tonight I took a page out of Brittany and Linda's book, and I attended a virtual meeting that they had. And guess what? I met a fellow editor who lives in my area and also edits in my industry. So that was kind of exciting. And I thought, oh my God, this is so cute. But then 2 days later, I get another text message from her and she's like, you're not going to believe this, but we're meeting tomorrow for virtual coffee and to talk. And I was like, wow, this is really going well. And then Friday, in the same week, that Friday, we get another message and that she was thrilled because they had had virtual coffee. And it turned out that the editor that she had met at that meeting worked with a company that she had been wanting to contract with for a very long time.
Oh.
And they were already sharing resources. And she was able to give this new editor also the context that she had where she was contracting with. So all in all, you know, I remember she always tells me this, all it took was, you know, for 14 years, I've been getting this newsletter and never having the courage to engage in it. It just took engaging in one virtual online, you know, meeting for all of this to come out.
All these doors opened.
Absolutely.
In such a short amount of time as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting there is what you touched on there is that I think sometimes editors, maybe not editors that are more embedded in our communities, but maybe newer editors worry that other editors are competitors. And that maybe that's not where you should be networking. But that's a lovely example of how networking with your colleagues actually opens professional doors to you, and that we're not all, you know, that other editor was willing to share contacts with her there and help her with open to new opportunities. And I think that's what's really lovely about the editing community in general, is that it's one of the most supportive professional networks that I think you could be involved in.
Absolutely. It really is. In fact, years ago, I remember talking to a couple of professional marketers, and they were really shocked when I told them about the kind of collegiality that exists within our community internationally. And they were horrified that, I mean, genuinely horrified that people would be so helpful to each other, because it's all very quite, you know, kind of cutthroat in their industry, because it's, you know, I don't know that it's more competitive than ours, but there's definitely a perception that it's more competitive, and therefore your colleagues, they may be your friends, but when it comes to work, they're your enemies. So you don't give up with them. And it's not like that in our community. No. Is it?
And that's one of the things that I think Linda and it was important to us in writing the book, was to you know, in the beginning part of the book, we talk a bit about what is networking really, and we sort of have this part where we compare people's perceptions with how we would prefer to think of networking. And it really is, you know, more about being supportive and, you know, collaborative, and basically that idea that, you know, a rising tide lifts every boat, right? That we're in this together, and that we can all help one another and do better individually and collectively. And so that attitude, I think it's something that you do find, that sort of positive attitude is something that you find with a lot of editors, and that generosity. And it's just so much better for you as an individual business person, and just for the community when that's the approach that you take. And I think that's part of what we wanted to get across, was like, you don't have to feel isolated and like, you know, you're in this kind of competition. There's a lot of work, there's a lot of opportunity, and we all do better when we help one another.
It's a very human attitude.
Yeah, I do love that expression, you know, a rising tide raises all boats. I just think it really encapsulates such a lot about the editing community, and how I think many of us like to think about our work and our approach to our colleagues. So what strikes me is that this really isn't forced, is it? It's a much more organic approach. And so I'm assuming that you think that there are advantages to this method rather than going out there and tackling it like some kind of, you know, advanced military campaign.
Yes, definitely. I think that, you know, networking is not about instant gratification, but that expectation of instant results is actually, I think, what drives a lot of the negative networking behavior that, you know, people sometimes see, and they're just like, oh, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that way. And it's one of the things that makes people feel uncomfortable about trying to network, is because they're afraid of, how they're going to be perceived, or they're only familiar with that very sort of old school sort of, I don't know, hobnobbing sort of networking, right? And so, but that said, you can still be intentional about how you network, but interact in a very real and meaningful way with people. And one of the things that we talk about is how to assess your business goals and then use them as a guide for your networking efforts. So that way, you're not just randomly networking, trying to connect with anybody, but you're thoughtfully building a network. And so in that way, I guess it could be like a campaign, but more like a campaign of happiness, like a campaign
a campaign with a hug.
Oh, that's lovely. I like the campaign of happiness idea.
Yeah,
I really like that. Yeah.
That's life, isn't it, though? That's a good life. That's what we try to do. Life sometimes feels like a campaign, but it's about feeling comfortable and good and happy, rather than it being a battle and bloody warfare, So.
Basically, what we talked about, I can't remember the last time I felt competitive towards a fellow editor about a project. I don't think I felt that in years. And I think it's also because, when we're networking, it just becomes, when you're networking and you're getting results, it just becomes second nature. It's part of your everyday behavior. So we don't want people to feel like we're using or we're abusing connections. And I definitely never want to come across as salesy to anybody. And what we do find, though, and I find in my own experience when people try to connect with me, is that the ones that do have that salesy approach are the ones that don't get good results. So like Brittany said, you have to have, it's in your best interest to have a plan based on your business goals, but also, going back to who we are as people and what's going to work for me now. Because one of the things to keep in mind is that as our lives change and, our goals change, our business goals change, our networking has to fluctuate and it has to change. It really has to be dynamic. And I can tell you that the way I used to network before 2019 is very different than the way I network today. We've all had to adapt.
Yeah. So let's talk about money. Money and networking, because paid versus free is something that comes up all the time in the international editorial community, whether we're talking about our client work, our professional associations, and even certain types of marketing. And yet some say that volunteering is the new networking superpower. So do you think it's true?
Oh, yes.
Definitely.
It's a secret, but it's a superpower.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, volunteering in professional organizations has been a big part of how Linda and I have both developed our networks. But we actually weren't thinking about networking when we started volunteering. We were volunteering because we cared about whatever we were involved in. So, like for me, I volunteer outside of editing. I volunteer with various animal rescue groups. And I know Linda does other volunteering as well. But like when it comes to professional organization volunteering, we both are have been active in the diversity initiative and in other editing groups. And at first we were just, that's just something that was important to us. And then it's only later that we've realized, hey, we really have met so many more people and just feel so much more a part of our editing community since we've been volunteering.
And that must come, sorry,
no, carry on. Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking that, and once you get known, then you're more likely to be on someone's radar when they're thinking, oh, you know what, I can't do this work right now. I'm trying to think of someone who would be a good fit for this. If you're known and you're visible through your volunteering, even if it's your professional volunteering, you're more likely to be top of mind. So by the work you're doing and the interest you have, you automatically end up, without even trying, just making yourself more visible, which is great.
You do. And I think another thing that's great about volunteering, especially for newer editors, is that, a lot of times we don't have the opportunity, especially when you're first starting out, to show what you can do. Get those first opportunities can be difficult to come by. And one of the great things about volunteering is that you have the opportunity to show other people, your work ethic, the quality of your work, how you're solution oriented, all that kind of thing. You can demonstrate, and while helping a good cause, and it's a chance for people to get to know you, not just as a person, but as a potential colleague, as a potential hire or referral. And I think that that's a great thing about volunteering, is that you can contribute no matter where you are in your career. Everybody has something to offer, and you never know what great friendships or relationships or business opportunities can come out of it.
And all the time you're showing, not telling.
Oh, you took the words out of my mouth there, Harnby.
Oh, sorry. It's a little fiction thing of mine.
I was just about to say that, and you stole my thunder. Never mind. But it is
great minds.
Yes, exactly. But it is so true that, by just being visible and putting yourself out there in volunteering roles, you're showing people, you're demonstrating, lots of skills, even if you're not consciously doing that, by doing whatever volunteering it is, you're just putting yourself out there.
Showing you're engaged, aren't you?
Exactly.
Like you're engaged, and people are more likely to trust people who come across as engaged rather than disinterested or in it for some of their own agenda. So
definitely.
Right.
Yeah, I think it shows commitment so much. I have to be we have to be honest with you guys, but when we wrote the book, volunteering was not a chapter in the book. And what ended up happening is that as we were revising, we would talk so much about volunteering, these little tidbits in every single chapter, that it was clear by the end of our first round that volunteering needed to be its own chapter. And the more we looked back on the volunteer work we were both doing, it really dawned on us that a lot of the projects that we get and the ones that we love, that we love doing and that are actually financially successful for us have come from referrals from someone that we've met while volunteering. And, going back to what we talked about before we started recording, but had I not volunteered for the EFA conference in 2019 and sat at that registration desk, I would have not seen Louise come down the stairway and come and register for the conference.
All on my own. I was all on my own. And then I wasn't.
Exactly. So that was, volunteering at that event really paid off, I think, in the long run too.
And we might have not been having this conversation now if you and I hadn't met, because we wouldn't have had that initial relationship whereby we could reach out to each other and say, how about it, kind of thing. And that's a really good point as well. Like that meeting was, I think, like you say, in 2019, or was it 2018? It could have even been, but anyway, it was a few years back, and it's a good reminder that the work you do today, whether it's volunteering or some other kind of networking opportunity, you might end up reaping rewards for that much further down the road, but that doesn't matter. And in a sense, networking is a bit like a sort of it can be digital, but it's a form of content marketing in a way. It's the same principle. It's about building trust and engaging with people and finding solutions to things so that people come to understand why you're worth having on board in whatever capacity that means.
It's also interesting because I think this is quite timely, because there has been a conversation in some professional organizations about whether they should use volunteers or not, or whether everybody should be paid. And I know the CIEP has, thought very carefully about the role that volunteers have to contribute, and if they should want to. And I think reminding people that volunteering has many benefits to it, for their business, is a good way of, sort of framing that, you may be giving your time and it's much appreciated, but it has benefits for you as well that you may not expect at the time, that you can't anticipate. But just by putting yourself you got to be in the arena, haven't you? You've got to be there
Yeah.
to be able to benefit from these potential connections you can make.
Got to be in it to win it.
Exactly. And volunteering is a very non-threatening way of networking,
Yeah.
because you're doing it entirely on your own terms, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's something that you have chosen to do, because it's something that you're interested in.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And it's a good opportunity to get to, not just to get to know other editors, but also to continue your kind of professional education, because I know for Linda and I, you know, being like in the diversity initiative, for example, was just a great learning opportunity, because you're educating yourself. So there's just, I guess, like Denise was saying, there's just so many different benefits that come through volunteering. And so
I want to just add, by the way, that in reality, the reach of volunteering is what you're giving back to the community, not so much what you're taking. But as you're giving back, you also have an opportunity to, you know, to receive as well. So
Yeah.
Definitely.
We do, but it's that old thing: what goes around comes around. You know, it's an old cliche, but it's true. Sometimes
it's true.
you know, when you give to people, you become trusted, and so they're more likely to want to give back. So, and this, I don't think we should be ashamed of the idea that we benefit as well as it. We don't have to be just on the giving. There's nothing wrong with benefiting from doing good work.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So if you could give people just one piece of advice about networking from the book, what would it be?
So for me, I think the piece of advice would be, don't be afraid to be yourself and to connect with people in a way that's natural and comfortable for you. I think lots of times we can kind of get down on ourselves about, oh, why aren't you more outgoing in this way or that way? But I would say your strength is who you are, is being yourself. That's what you bring to any situation. And that's really what people connect with. So have the courage to be yourself.
Nicely said.
Yeah. I think it's what we talked about before, you know, be honest with yourself, with who you are, with what you can do, be brave. Nothing ever grows in the comfort zone. Isn't that the saying? The comfort zone is a beautiful place when nothing ever grows there. So be willing to step a little bit out of your comfort zone. There's nothing to lose if you reach out in a genuine and kind way. And another piece of advice of the book is networking doesn't have to be a path that you go on solo. You're not the Mandalorian having to go out there and fight off the worlds on your own. You can like team up with other people and network together and, do the work of the book together and grow together. So it is something, networking in itself and going out there doesn't have to be a solo experience.
Denise and I have talked about this before, and put out a similar piece of advice for people who are nervous about or feel marketing is a struggle. There's nothing better than if you find it overwhelming, one really good tip, whether it's any type of marketing, including networking, that's such a good point, Linda, is do it with someone else. I mean, Denise and I would never have done this podcast on our own.
No, never.
We wouldn't.
No way.
There were certain things we will do on our own, like we were both in our comfort zone with blogs, but a podcast, that was a different thing, and that was something that happened organically as a result of our networking relationship. And
we're grateful for it because it's fabulous. We love the podcast. Every editor I know loves this podcast. So
that's so
wonderful.
nice.
That's partly because of some of the wonderful guests we get.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's hope we get some next time, because these two aren't working out, are they? But yeah, I mean, that's such a good point, though. Just to reiterate that, if you're nervous about doing something or doing some form of networking, see if you can grab a pal and take someone along with you for the ride, because people love doing stuff with other people.
Yeah, it's fun.
So can we return back to the book for just a mo, because it is rather beautiful and it really does have a workbook feel about it. That's what I loved about it. It's not just a cozy read. It's a warm read. It's an engaging read, but it's also a call to action.
Yes, it's when we started writing it, it was really just a book. And then Brittany and I are both note takers, and I'm the one that writes in the margins of every single book I have with my notes and my ideas and things that I need to develop further. So we knew that we need to have space here for people to write down their ideas and where they wanted to go and take their business. So it really invites, I think the book is really inviting, and helps you connect and do the work, with other people. And like I said before, just really growing your network in a natural way.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've nailed it.
And it's kind of interesting because we've actually heard from some readers that they're working through the book as part of their mastermind group or a study group. And that was so exciting for us to learn, because that's kind of what we envisioned. We love this idea of doing things together. I mean, Linda and I have had this partnership, and in writing the book, and the book is another example where I think on our own, neither of us would have really been ready to go this route. But doing it with a partner that you trust, and that, you can kind of step out into sort of the scary places together. And that's really been a benefit for us. So I hope that that's something, that the book will encourage other people to do that as well.
I love that must be so wonderful for you to hear, that people are actually using it as a tool.
It was exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a lovely note for us to finish on there. Yeah. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much, Brittany and Linda. It's been absolutely brilliant having you on the podcast this week.
It really has.
This has been great. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, you're so welcome. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode. You can rate, review, and subscribe to us via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whichever platform you prefer.
Yeah, and thank you so much for listening. Now, if you'd like to help support the Editing Podcast, you can join our Patreon community for as little as £3 a month and get exclusive access to live Q&As for just a few quid more.
Yeah, we'd absolutely love to have you on board. So if you're interested, just hop over to patreon.com/editing podcast. We'll include that link in the show notes too. So she's been Louise.
And she's been Denise, and they've been Brittany and Linda. Join us again soon.
Bye.
Bye.